going. I'm not sure whether design is here. Design is driving that PR right now. I think if we can merge this PR today, and that would allow us to come up with a build today, and then we can still release next Tuesday, which is the date that we proposed last week. But if this PR still gets delayed, I think we might need to delay our 1.8 release a little bit again, like 2 days after this PR gets merged, so that we can have some time for the perf test run. But we have already had a customized Istio build with that fix and run perf test with that, and everything looks good. So we have pretty high confidence that this change will just work fine.
Does anybody have any thoughts or questions?
If it slips, what will the slippage look like?
I hope Lisa is here, but yeah, I think if it slips, I would propose 2 days after this PR is merged, and then like that would give us some buffer for build and the perf test, and I would expect that PR could be merged like definitely today or early next week. So latest, I think next Thursday maybe. Would that be acceptable?
I mean, it takes what it takes to fix the bug. So
yeah.
If it's Thursday, then it's Thursday.
Okay, cool.
Does anybody have any specific timeline concern? I don't think we are in a situation where we can choose to defer fixing this bug. We have sometimes made that decision, but I don't think this bug would allow us in this case.
Louis, the only request I have is that the date be communicated when it's known. That'd be great. But yeah,
I mean, the release manager folks should make sure that they communicate the date to the community and just provide a status update.
Yeah, currently it's still next Tuesday. We can update the date like after like end of the day today or next Monday.
And we have had no other emergent P0s that are worth raising at this point.
We had one VM installation related issue. I think Steven is working on it, so I don't worry too much about it. I'm pretty like it related to a fix in the Istio cutoff. So I'm not sure whether Steven is here.
Yeah, so that fix actually was not going to be sufficient. That was just kind of like a thing that would just still break as soon as the JOT expired. I am working on a different fix now that I am not 100% sure will work, or I'm not 100% sure I'll have it done by the end of the day. I'm not really sure why the tests aren't working. I got it to work in my manual testing. But the issue is that we are not fetching certs to auth. Like we're not using the JWT first to go get certs to do auth on the VM. And so my change is just to try to get it to use the JWT and then switch to certs after we actually get them, which is the behavior we'd expect.
And this is for the VM only case?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Louis, also there was a bug reported this morning that looks problematic, and that when you upgrade gateways that you've created on your own with an IOP, things break badly. Haven't reproduced it, but there's a good set of reproducers. I don't have time really to look at it today, but it is an install bug and probably fairly straightforward to fix. But I think it may be something we want to fix because we have a lot of customers that do this in the field. I'm not talking about IBM, I'm talking about Istio. So
yeah. Sorry, I sort of caught what you said, Steve, when you said IOP.
Oh yeah, so the IOP, people use the IOP to create gateways. When you create a gateway that way, and then you upgrade from 1.7 to 1.8, that upgrade fails.
So Louis, I linked the issue that Steve
Okay.
just mentioned. So I actually also want to bring this up. We actually find out a fix for the issue.
Cool.
There is a key thing I want to highlight for everybody is the revision flag for gateway. The semantic of the revision usage for the gateway changed from 1.7 to 1.8. So in 1.7, when you use revision, it basically says you want a different gateway from your default gateway. And then in 1.8, that revision was mostly referred to the revision of your Istio D. So, so in our case, our user was using revision for the customer gateway in 1.7 during the IOP Istio operator YAML file. But in 1.8, because of the semantic of the revision changed, because of the work we're doing, I think Martin made some change to support revision-based gateway upgrades. So the semantics of the revision changed. The resolution is you would actually go into that Istio operator YAML and remove the revision field, and then everything is been working for that particular simple scenario we tried. So this is a concern because I think our revision semantics is different than Helm, and this is also the release we start to support Helm 3, and Helm natively support revision. So
what do you mean by Helm natively supports revisions?
well, so when you're using Helm, I was looking at Niraj doc, correct me if I'm wrong, Niraj, you could install using like -- revision or some type of flag to pass into Helm.
Yes.
Yep.
But that is not creating a different, I mean, the name of the deployment, the name of the, the ingress gateway is still the same. I mean, it's I think that.
Are we talking specifically about gateway charts or the
Yes,
discovery?
gateway charts, yes.
Yeah, so gateway charts are not supported even in Helm. If you look at the documentation, I think we removed it.
You mean revision are not supported, or just gateway in general are not supported?
Revision for gateways is not supported. Revisions for discovery is through Helm.
Revision meaning that you cannot point to a particular revision. I think that is supported and should work. I mean, I'm using it. I mean, the Helm charts definitely support it. I don't know if you're testing it or not, but
When I tested it again, it didn't
we
work.
tested the default control plane.
So are you guys saying that the user did something they weren't supposed to do and that's why they had an outage?
Well, no. The user was based best practice for 1.7 to use revision to create customer gateway. And when they test with latest of 1.8, their customer gateway didn't get updated to 1.8. I mean, they get updated, but didn't come up as running. And the fix was to remove that revision they had in their Istio operator.yaml file because the semantic of the revision changed from 1.7 to 1.8 for gateways. Because if you don't remove that revision in the Istio operator, it would point to like Istio D-revision as the discovery address, which in their case, they were using like the in-place upgrade for Istio D, so it doesn't make any sense for them.
So for them, they will not use, I mean, if you use the default Istio D, you will not use, you'll use the default for ingress as well, and that works. I mean, that's a default install.
Right, but the customer, they could do customer gateway, which they would specify a different revision.
But that's not a revision of ingress. I mean, that's, I mean, you specify a different gateway name or different service name, or I mean, that's, you don't customize, the revision don't apply to gateway. And besides for Helm, yes.
Well, for 1.7, it does apply. For 1.8, it doesn't apply to the gateway. The revision applies only to Istio D. That's the confusing part. It's the name applies to the gateway for different types of gateway.
So what do you propose? I mean, it's clear what we're, yes.
Let me propose something, actually. I think the root cause is a problem with the manifest, but if there's a workaround that Lynn has found, we can release note it, and we can put it in the upgrade notes and move on, and then we can fix the bug later. That would be my proposal.
I mean, we can definitely fix the Helm. I mean, the correct behavior is very clear. And I mean, with Helm, at least it's clear that we do not install at the same time the gateway and the control plane, because there are two different Helm charts. That's what we want to do with operator as well. And I think Steve's documents describe this process as well. So the problem remains, how do you configure the gateway? And gateway, just like any other workload, you need to point it to a particular revision of Istio, which can be anything. And the gateway itself, the name of the gateway, it's a separate. I mean, there are two different things in gateway. It's, you know, if you have custom gateways, you have the name of the custom gateway. And each gateway can point to an arbitrary control plane. So there are two completely different concepts: the name of the gateway and the namespace, and also the revision that you are using.
Okay, that's awesome. Maybe we can take this offline. I think
Okay.
there's at least a workaround. Thanks, Louis.
Okay, so is there an action item that you would like the TOC to assign to anybody other than resolving or finding a workaround? I'm just going to put on
Yes.
here that Lynn, Costin, and Steve should come to some conclusion.
Yeah, so one action, certainly I would think we need to make sure the upgrade notice is pretty clear on the semantic change. We definitely need to look at that. Istio Cuddle, there may be worthwhile to look at the tooling side. I don't know where we are on Istio Cuddle for 1A. Do we have like a dry run command to tell people these are the things, you know, they should be thinking about modifying, update before they move to 1.8? If we do, this would be a good flag to detect and warn user. I think those are the two actions I can come through. And Neeraj, maybe you can take a look at the Helm side to see if there's any update we need to do on the Helm document.
I can, from the Helm document, which we'll discuss during in the next topic that we have. It's already pretty clearly mentioned what is supported and not, and it mentions that gateway is not supported.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, if gateway not supported, then there's no action from you then.
Not supported at all, or not supported at all?
I think if you read the documentation,
Okay.
you will get it. Thanks.
Okay.
Neeraj, can you link to the documentation in the notes?
It's the next topic.
Okay.
Actually, so one question I have, I mean, I think these are good mitigations, but should this issue have been allowed to occur in the first place? Is there anything we could have done to prevent it?
I'm pretty sure this was an intended change, right?
Sorry, what was that?
I think this was an intended change.
Well, I think we need to make fewer intended changes like this that break users.
The change was to not break users. I mean, the change for gateway to decouple the gateway upgrade from the control plane was intended to avoid problems where gateway will be broken when you upgrade the control plane, and all the issues related with the coupling that we had in the past.
Then how did it break the user in this case? I mean, it had the opposite of the
previously it was coupled, and now it's not.
So previously, there was really no clear path for this technique, and some people figured out a path, and it wasn't documented. And then now we have a documented path, and it's different than what people used in the past. So,
okay.
Yeah, environments working group actually did an amazing job of fixing a problem, but that will have upgrade issues in the short term, sadly.
Okay, so we just need to make this abundantly clear to people in release notes.
And upgrade, yeah.
One question I have there is, you know, often we ask people to run Istio Cuddle Analyze pre-upgrade, right? We don't, as yet, have a kind of mechanical set of steps that would catch the things that we would normally put in release notes and surface that to end users. Right, so we're still very heavily relying on documentation and people reading the documentation to catch issues like this.
Yes.
Yes.
So the thing that we should be looking to do is to condition users to use standard tooling in all cases, and then the tooling can help surface the issue.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the documentation I've seen is not clear. Like, even if users read the documentation, it's not clear to them that they're going to be affected and that they need to take action. So I'm worried about the doc heavy approach.
And I
So,
think
one
traditionally,
thing-
Istio was more towards like analyze your resources, but not so much on installation operator YAML. So that might be worth looking into. Is Istio the right place for this type of detection also?
Well, and even if we had like a pre-upgrade command in Istio control, which sounds like a good idea, I'm not certain that we would catch this scenario or what we would advocate that the user do. Because this was a scenario that we didn't document anywhere. So like all of our docs tests and everything else would never be covered.
With some of the mechanisms we're proposing, I still think this one would have slipped through. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it can't be captured after the fact, right, and put out in a patch release.
So
right? Are you saying there is no way that we could detect this issue?
No, that's not what I intend to say. I simply say that we wouldn't have added this to the upgrade check because we weren't aware of it.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Unless somebody reported, yes.
Right. That's what patch releases are for, right?
Gotcha.
Like not every user upgrades on .0, right?
And that's why we do testing before the official 108 goes out, right?
Sure, right. But I'm not worried about trying to catch everything before it happens. I'm worried about making sure that once we've identified something that's worth catching, that we
don't repeat it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
For the next release, can we try to have time to write analyzers for anything that we are deprecating or changing the behavior of? If
Absolutely.
we'd had 2 weeks notice, we could have done this and made the 1.8 analyze do this.
How does that flow work today, Ed? I mean, do people tell you this change is coming and you write the analyzer, or is everyone expected to contribute to their own?
So only our team has been writing analyzers other than Neeraj. And
thanks, Neeraj.
So if I don't notice a change, and I was out a lot this month for unrelated reasons, we just need to be more aware of it and try to just make an issue, and I'll try to tackle it for everyone.
That being said, with the rate of change, I expect that the UX working group will not be able to keep up with all of the breaking changes that are made. I would encourage you, if you're contributing a breaking change, please reach out and we will assist you in the development of an analyzer.
Can we start in the next working group leads working group? Just point the other leads to how to write an analyzer. I mean, it could be as simple as just here are a couple good PRs. Copy this.
Yeah, it's very well documented actually. It used to be. I don't know if it's anymore. I would suggest we move off this topic because there are some other 1.8 topics that we should cover.
Just one tiny comment here. The documentation is also kind of still in two worlds. I mean, there is the old style where you Istio catalyst installing everything, and some documents are in the new world where you install control plane separately from the gateway. For example, with Helm, it can only be separated because there are two different Helm charts. The documentation for safe upgrade for gateway, which we are moving towards that I think wrote, are also, you do not install the gateway when you operate on the control plane. While many documentation examples still assume the old way. So that is a breaking change that will keep going. I mean, 1.9, it will be even more, separate, and user will control the gateway. There is a proposal from John also on the same area. So I want the TOC to be aware of this, and everyone here to pay attention to this.
So Costin, I think the deal is we want to catch those like a regression test with the software itself versus the customer catching them, right? So
yeah, perfectly said.
Changes, but we should point them out to the user. You're breaking stuff with your upgrade.
Yeah, and also I think TOC being aware, most of us sadly do get aware of these things. The problem is users don't. So we need to structure it in a way where, like Steve said, devs catch it early and also users catch it, right?
Okay, we should move on, I think. But I would like, I'm asking other TOC members, right? Clearly, this is a common occurrence, right? Where there's an install or upgrade edge case that we don't anticipate before the release, and sometimes these get found after the release. but we don't have a way of capturing them mechanically. And we want to get to a point where we capture them mechanically so that users doing the same thing over and over again get an expected result. Is that something that we all agree on as a principle? And then we can ask the UX folks to provide as a recommendation.
I generally agree.
Okay, so as a trial run, whoever is providing the fix for this issue, can you evaluate the cost of writing an analyzer for it and proposing that create a tracking bug or something? And ideally implement it. Does that seem like an unreasonable ask?
To me, yes.
Are you asking just here?
That's by the way, I've had other chats, private chats with Costin, where instead of calling them customers, he calls them regression testers.
No, it's a bit more complicated than it sounds, Louis, because it's you need to guess the user intent, and it's a bit it's not as easy as it seems to figure out if they wanted to use a different control plane or to use.
It's okay if an analyzer is not prescriptive, right?
Yeah.
It's okay for an analyzer to say, look, you might have this issue. Go read this doc.
That's reasonable. I mean, we can easily detect if there are gateways that are not the standard gateway. That's clear.
So, Louis, I'll take this on as long as we keep it bounded to just that. And as long as there's no immediate deadline for 1.8. So I'll do that work.
Yeah, there's a TOC Ask UX working group.
Oh, UX working group. Okay.
And then there's one for the do we have the right machinery around a pre-upgrade step?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things I'm hoping is that as our upgrade and rollback test coverage gets better, we will start catching these issues. Even the unintentional breakages. And one of the ways we can let people continue with the PR is to write a validator.
I think when the analyzers work started, that was the intent. It's just that only the UX working group eventually ended up writing that, and nobody did.
So this is a way of detecting the issue and then getting more people to participate.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that gateways can be in any namespace managed by users, independent of our install. So it's keep in mind.
Stuff will always slip through.
Let's not solve it now.
No.
We agree in principle what needs to be done, and we'll let Steve and some other folks who are going to work on this issue, right? Figure out the right way to write this code.
All right, so I'm going to assign these two AIs. So Mitch and Ed, can I ask you guys to come back with a standardized proposal for a pre-upgrade tooling as a UX?
Sure thing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Louis, there are a few comments from Rob in the chat. We should at least discuss if he wants to say something.
I don't want to take up any more time. It just seems like this is an issue that we have every release with stuff breaking users, and then we just had all those weeks of going over the user surveys where they're not upgrading and things. And
I agree with you, Rob.
Stuff like this is one of those things. It's like, okay, yeah, well, that's going to take me more time to upgrade because now I got to rework stuff to get there. And do we consider this when we make these breaking changes? And if we're making breaking changes, do we at least make an effort to try to preserve the existing functionality so that at least if users are using those, they're not broken until say 1.9 or 1.10? But it's more, I guess, rhetorical than anything.
So I don't know, and I haven't read the issue in depth, but it sounds like there was an internal conflict about the definition revision, right? That bubbled up to users, right? So we had an internal inconsistency.
And part of it was the original version was undefined behavior.
And that has an interaction with a customer assumption about how an upgrade may or may not work. We didn't document the assumption, I presume, or we didn't codify or make part of the product the assumption, although we may have accidentally steered customers towards it.
Yeah, I know.
Is there a good critical assessment of this state in the bug that people can go and read and come to their own conclusions about whether this should have been treated as if it was a supported feature or not? Right, there's obviously always going to be things in the gray area, but I don't feel like I have enough context to be able to assess whether this falls into gray area or not to be able to make a call at the moment.
Yeah, how about people, do the homework Louis asked, and then come back to the TOC if you still have concern. For me, I'm working on this bug for 2 days, stuff we've been telling user to do, but I'm happy, it's heading to a good direction. And I really like, Louis, what you have with the framework, with pre-update analyzer, because if that tool exists, it would save me a day to troubleshooting, figure out what's wrong, and I would be happy, honestly, as long as there's a tooling to tell me it was dig it out hard, which is most user would be complaining.
And so, the one thing TOC can do here is we can take a harder line on issues like this and say, look, this is a breaking change for customer. It may not be one that we intended to be supported, but we accidentally ended up in this spot. And so the minimum bar, if we are going to affect this change, is that there must be some tooling. Right? And you, if you want that to not be the case, you must get an exception.
Yes.
You would have to sign off or something like that. I don't know how people in the project in general, not just the TOC members, feel like adopting that as a standard. I don't want to do it by the TOC to do it by fiat, but it obviously does present an upgrade risk, and upgrade risks are probably our biggest single issue. So it clearly warrants consideration.
From what I've seen with some recent user and customer outages, we can't do this anymore. We got to change, have fewer backwards compatibility breaks.
Yeah, I think we're all in violent agreement towards the desire. Obviously, the implementation is where this gets a little murkier, because changes sneak in, and then issues are open and people start recommending those changes even though they are never documented. It's really hard to track it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have a great track record of following our own standards as a project.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Well, the problem is not like adding a new standard. I don't think would help that. We need a change in practice that we actually follow our own standards.
We enforce it somehow, which is, I'm still missing that piece, Louis. How are we going to enforce it?
Well, so one obvious way is if there's a detected upgrade issue that wasn't caught in release, but customer files a bug, then the remediation is to issue a patch release with an analyzer that detects it at a minimum. So at least customers, right? The big problem we have with customers, if you tell them they have to make a change, as long as they know they have to make it, right, you have a much better user experience, right? What you don't want to have happen is they don't know and then they end up broken, right? Those are two radically different outcomes. Customers will tolerate doing some work on upgrade as long as it's prescriptive.
And I'll also say that we actually have 2 people now assigned to work on this problem. So there's some hope.
I agree with remediation, Louis, after the fact. I'm still worried about the prevention.
So would this have been caught in kind of like, did it slip in the design review phase, or was it just bypassed? Like that seems to be then the process failure, right? If we really want to catch it that early.
I don't think it was perceived to be a backwards compatibility break. It was perceived to be a new feature without precedent.
I searched on the Istio documentation. I don't find any reference for that particular installation mode for gateways. So is it even a supported feature that we are breaking, or just some users doing some random stuff?
Right, so this is the gray area, right, where we interact with user assumptions. Right, we never made it a supported feature in the sense of we documented it and told people to use it, but common practice made it so.
Yeah, and the user here is Ram, who is very well versed with what the community does, right?
Right. In fact, when Ram worked on that in 1.7, I consulted Martin and asked him for expertise. If we do a customer gateway, in addition to default gateway, what should I do? And I was recommended to use revision. So
is there any test for the multi-revision gateway? Is there any test for the upgrade for multi-revision gateway? I mean, that's really where we have 300 options and values.
Yeah, the configuration was clearly wrong, in my opinion. That was never intended to work. It happens to work by a miraculous joining of multiple different bugs. So this is not the same as other cases where we broke backwards compatibility, in my opinion. This is someone using a bizarre configuration that we happen to change. So we can still detect it and stuff, but it's not really the same class as the other ones, in my opinion.
So this is in the same category as we had another issue where someone used proto text format to define configuration, which is not in any of our documentations. It's not advertised, but it happened to work. And when we changed that to JSON, which is what we really document, it broke the user. So this then seems like that it was an undocumented feature which happened to work, and then I don't think we can apply the same rules there.
Right. I mean, as Louis said, that issues like this, we might get lucky. If we have expanded test coverage on the upgrades, we might detect it, but probably not. And in cases where we can't, we can always react to it quickly and address it in an early patch release.
So can we push this discussion over to our upgrade working group discussion? And
sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are we good with what we're doing in 1.8?
I am not clear. That was my question, actually. Maybe I think Lynn, because she is involved in this, she's going to surface if she needs TOC inputs.
No, I think the goal is to capture enough information on the bug and for all TOC members to review it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, ideally, I'd like to see the framework in place so we can contribute easily when things are detected before 1.8. But I understand, the release schedule and everything. Because if we have the framework, everybody can chime in when the issue happens. So it would just be so much helpful. Like, one user's issue translate to a tooling for 100 other users.
Yeah. So Louis, can we write that until the information is surfaced in the bug, becomes a blocker, right? For 1.8, that's what we are saying. Until we have more information.
Yeah, we can. The TOC should evaluate offline, but this is right now a blocker.
Okay, awesome.
But I think the TOC should make a commitment that once, they should be paying attention. So Lynn, can you make sure that there's follow-up?
So should we follow up on the workgroup meeting for the updates? That would be a good time.
We're just talking about whether we're going to treat this bug as a release blocker. That's not a regular working group thing, right? And nor do I think, the decision about whether this is a blocker or not is not predicated on anything that we just asked Mitch to do or Ed to do, right? But it might be predicated on what we asked Steve to do, which is, no. I don't mean that none of the analyzer work, is going to happen before 1.8.
That's my feeling too, yeah.
Right, so that's out. right? The only question is, are we comfortable with this bug being a release blocker or not? Do we require a fix or not?
And is it a bug or not?
Right.
Because it's a non-supported feature that, it's.
Yeah, my gut feeling is just make it clear in our docs and add tooling when the tooling is in place. But I rely on everybody.
I think that's
and I can socialize again on Mondays and see if you guys have objections.
Okay, so then we're saying it's not a blocker if there is sufficient doc.
Right, if there's a useful workaround and proving to work, which has been proving to work for long.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's, yeah.
All right, let's move on to Helm.
Thanks, Larry. So I have attached the enhancement issue. If you can click on it and open, that has all the assets related to promotion of Helm v3 support in 1.8. This is proposing making it alpha. Environments working group yesterday or day before yesterday approved the RFC, and from their side it was directionally approved. There are docs, there are tests for it. If you scroll down, there were some suggestions. It says that environments working group made how to improve the documentation. That's also in the PR right now. So I'm basically waiting for now TOC, yay or nay, to make it alpha, or the other options will be keep it experimental or remove it.
So you're basically asking for a review of the RFC and the doc.
I'm not asking for so when we say that TOC needs to approve in this template, I don't actually know what TOC has to do, because those docs have been thoroughly reviewed by the environments working group and the docs working group.
Yeah, it's just
so is this just a any objections question?
I think so.
Yeah, this is a do we approve marking this one alpha in the release?
Yeah.
Any objections? And I think I have lots of comments in there, obviously, right? Like my main one was there's nothing in the doc today that says how to configure it or what configuration options are supported. So we should fix that. Otherwise, I'm good.
Yeah, that PR, Sven, that is right now shown in the screen, does that.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I will love your feedback on it.
Okay.
I did have a question about the template. Seems to have a API review section, and it's crossed out and also not done. So should that be in the template? And if not, then why isn't this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for this one, I don't know what kind of APIs we're talking about. The interface is through the Helm install upgrade. That's one API which everyone understands, and that is approved. The other API is configuration values, which in the environments working group, we discussed that in the docs, we will say the values supported are experimental right now. And in 1.9, we'll try to mature them. So I crossed it out because.
Okay, so we just deferred the problem.
We deferred the problem to 1.9 for now.
That's fair.
And the section with mesh config is the only one that is, consistent and supported.
Yeah,
So
and I added that in the docs.
Yep.
And John, the official environments working group position on this is that Helm itself is alpha. The API is experimental.
The configuration values fine. Yeah.
Values except mesh config, which is also alpha.
Right. That's our position.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So any other objections or questions from people? Okay, because it sure sounds like the environments working group has given it their stamp of approval. And so I guess TOC has no objections, and so just any remaining comments or items on the PR will be followed up on as per normal business.
I think so.
Yeah, so question on approval here. I mean, I have a similar doc as Niraj. So is it sufficient to secure like 2/3 of the member or half of the member? What are the criteria?
I think we should do a lazy consensus style where it's TOC has, whatever, a couple days or something.
It's really hard to get everyone's approval. Believe me, you ping and there's so much emails.
Right. So I would think maybe we set a threshold, like 2/3 or maybe a half would be sufficient to sign off. And same with work group leads, right? Because it's hard to get every single person's approval.
I would support half and 2 companies.
Yeah, I was gonna say only 2. You only need 2 people.
Okay.
But different companies, from my point of view.
As long as no one's saying no, right?
2 approvals and no nos. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks.
Anyone on TOC should be able to basically object, and we need.
So it's lazy veto. It's not lazy approval.
But even though I'm on TOC, I didn't want to bypass it. So folks were asking that on the template, this is not checked. Should we add release notes or not? So that's a fair question, right? So what Lynn asked is good clarification.
Okay, but nevertheless, we have quorum here, and I didn't hear any objection, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's what we do want to do. We want to just mention it in a TOC meeting, like, hey, we're making Helm support alpha in 1.8, and any objections, no. I think that's all we need to do.
Perfect. Thank you. Steve, it took less than 10 minutes, surprisingly.
I am impressed.
I am too. All right.
Okay. All right, I should switch back. Okay. Sorry, Shweta. We ate up 3/4 of the meeting. Networking group. Do you want to talk about 1.9?
Yeah. Sure.
Take it away, John.
Yeah, this should be fairly straightforward, I think, because most of it is just copy and pasted from 1.8. We don't intend to do much changes, but we want to focus more on stability and then, shorter release cycle and finishing up the things we started. So I think pretty much everything on here is copied from last time. The main things that aren't are all at the bottom end, like P3 and Nebulous Future that we've discussed, but we're probably not going to focus on. The main risk, I would say, is that the single outbound listener work, which may be something that's required if Envoy removes support for the APIs we depend on. We don't have an owner for that, so that's something we need to address.
John, why don't you, if you can send me the details offline, I could probably get an owner.
Yeah, sounds good.
So yeah, I just want to give people a minute or two to read the list and ask any questions if they have dependencies or expectations about these items. Obviously, your expectations should be modulated based on the priority. Right. John, we had a very similar list for 1.8. What percentage of that list did we get all the P0s, or did we not even get through all the P0s for 1.8?
Let me check what the 1.8 P0s were. I think a lot of it was stuff like BTS, which is going to take a while. So okay. we made progress there, but it's certainly not completed.
I do have a question on BTS.
And the other one was the single outbound listener, which is the same category.
Okay.
So there was one other one that was P0 that we did fix. So.
What was your question, Raj?
We have been, talking about it for pretty much most of this year now, and it has been a P0. And the P0s that we have been talking about were actually getting a demo ready that we can show before. Is it in a demoable state now? And this is the next P0, or are we still talking about getting to a demoable state?
I don't know. I think a demo is a great thing to ask for, and the person working on the project is not on this call. So I will ask Yu-Chen to give a demo if he can to the networking working group.
Okay. Just my broader concern is I understand the benefits of this, but at some point we should reevaluate if this will introduce some instabilities where is it worth taking the risk, or given where we are with terms of upgrades, Louis? Should we?
So clearly it's an impactful feature. It is something that like fundamentally we have to get to. Obviously there's a question about how and when. Right? Because some of the things that we're doing today with like ALPN and TLS are unnatural acts that are going to cause us pain.
I mean, I think that we need to hold it to a high bar in terms of stability, but I don't think users will be at all aware that
if we do it
switch
right.
over to if we do it right. But there's no migration or anything like that. It's just things should get more efficient, especially for traffic where you have short-lived TCP connections.
There is migration, I think, depending on how we set up. Hang on, can I finish? It will depending on the outbound ports and the policies that users have in their clusters, existing network policies.
I don't understand why. I could imagine we need to do the upgrade. You know, there'll be a period where you know, like the old revision is not using BTS, the new is. That would be an issue, but otherwise, I don't think it would be.
So the plan is to keep a very, very long time both of them working. So there will be no, I mean, 3 releases, 5 releases, whatever. Both of them will be active at the same time. And yes, at some point in 1 or 2 years, we can say stop using the old one and disabling it. If you.
So there's 2 classes of transition, right? There's when does it become the default for new installs, separate from how do we handle upgrades for meshes that span multiple revisions of a control plane and an Envoy version. So those are 2 independent tracks. There are impacts to adoption, right? Because telemetry may choose to only implement new features because they have an improved ability to propagate metadata. That will possibly cause, right, we'd have to be careful about mismatched expectations, right? Not necessarily bugs, right, but assumptions can become problematic. And then there's a question about promiscuity and capture, right? Because it's a more capable transport, it can do more things, maybe more things than we would have done with a previous revision, and therefore we might be more willing to put more things over it, which is an interesting functional question that could also lead to upgrade or downgrade or, you know, rollback issues that we would have to be cognizant of, right? So I think Costin's right about the timeline, right? We're already well over a year actually into speccing out and implementing this feature. I have no expectation that it will be less than a year making the transition to it. And the other thing I would say is that it's been, other than Yu-Chen, who else has worked on it? Right, it has got a pretty bad bus number. Right?
Well, people from Envoy have worked on it as well. I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely tons of folks working, like Alyssa and other folks working on it. But yeah, so it's also got this big head of line blocking thing that it takes a lot of upfront work in Envoy before we can even do a demo.
I see. But more or less, you are saying it's still worth investing into when the time comes when we have to surface it to users. We have to do a better scan of what's the impacts, whether it can be seamless, all that.
Yeah, so I think right now we're still in the state that we expect it to be a meaningful improvement. But because we haven't even done a demo, we aren't even at the state where we could make that as a statement, as a validated assertion.
Yeah,
but we do know that we need something better than what we currently have.
Yeah, and we are ensuring the changes that we are introducing because of this don't destabilize our core or have any side effects, right?
That's true.
I mean, I think we've already picked up some of the changes that went into Envoy in the 1.8 release implicitly, right? There's new code going into Envoy all the time for this. We haven't
That's
done
fair.
anything in the control plane yet.
Okay, got it. No, I'm happy. My only other question will be, I see P1, P2, P3. We rarely go beyond P0s. Sometimes we go to P1s in the list. At some point, we can start not adding P3s.
So I think there's a general question here, right? We allow, as a project, people, because it's community-based, we allow people to come in, propose a feature, and implement it, even if it's not a P0. Right? We are open to ideas, even though they're not necessarily aligned with kind of the top line roadmap for the project. Correct?
Yeah, true, but we don't have to accept them.
Right, right. So we historically said that it is up to the judgment of the working group about whether to accept them or not.
Right.
But here the contributors are also missing, right? So there's lack of that uptake that you're talking about.
Well, we have several full-time committed contributors working on the thing that's head of line blocking. Right. We aren't in a position to engage other contributors unless they want to pick up Envoy work, and we have a hard time getting lots of people to do that. In general.
So there is the piece of how it affects telemetry, and then we had allocated some time to it in the previous iteration, but again, BTS wasn't ready. So I expect that to change in this iteration, and there would be some effort put into that.
Okay, so that's right. So we will expect to see the snowball pick up as it rolls downhill a bit further. But that's somewhat unrelated to the point I think that I was making and Dan was latching on to, which is we are fairly relaxed about, from a top-down perspective, about what we might allow to be targeted to a release. And this is somewhat tied into how we do code and branch management and things of that nature. And there is somewhat of a conflict between that stance and stability. Right, which is, I think, the thing that's giving people pause, right?
I totally agree. Like if I look at that list, rows 11 to 14 are all going to be alphas, and they have no contributors. Ideally, someone from the community can pick them and start implementing them, right?
Right. So we don't have a codified relief valve to say, like, we don't have a mechanism right now which says, okay, these items, like the P0s and P1s, are approved to go into 1.9, and this other stuff has to go somewhere else. Because we don't have a somewhere else right now, other than your private branch. I don't know. So if I was going to ask anything right now, I would ask the build, test, and release working group to evaluate what a relief valve might look like. If we wanted to pivot to say that there was a more rigorous approval process for features going into master. Is there anything else that we could do that might address this problem, or do people have other ideas about what we could be doing?
You just had an idea earlier of saying that in a different branch. So if we had a dev branch or kind of a future branch where things like this could go.
The nebulous future branch?
Your branch where we have experimental features like, you know, HTTP3 support, and then in 1.9 or at some point we pick up into master when we believe it's ready.
Yeah, so the branch strategy is the obvious one, right? And I think we could ask the BTR group to kind of evaluate. Are there others?
And the general way you would do this, like if we treated this as if it was a continually delivered service, right? Like one is a branch and another is just getting really, really good at making sure that things are well tested even when they first go in, and have a clear flag control that they can't come on, right, in default. Like we should just be really careful reviewing new stuff and making sure it doesn't break things. But
yeah, I think those are the two dominant philosophies in this world, right?
Yeah,
we do have.
There's a related question here, which is, are these P3s actually are they actually new features we're worried about in that state, or are they more like this is our backlog of stuff we're not going to be doing, but we're just listing for fun? Like, what is the point of putting those entries on this sheet?
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, the main intent was that we talked about these in our working group. We are interested in these. We have absolutely no intent of doing these in the near future because they don't have owners. If someone said, I really want to implement H2E3 at the gateway, though, then we would be perfectly happy with that. But the working group doesn't have the bandwidth to solve it right now.
Okay, so these fall in the bucket of acceptable features, right, or tentative roadmap.
Highly desirable, very desirable, but no resources.
But it's in conflict. Even if we had resources, some of them can destabilize your core without understanding whether it will make the cutoff for the release. So that's my issue here.
Yeah, I think that is something we should follow up on. I think that's it. Do we want to kick that to test and release, as Louis was suggesting, or follow up in TOC some more to discuss?
I think test and release makes sense. Brian was trying to say something. I think he muted himself again. If he has suggestions now.
No, I was just saying we do have the requirements at alpha that it's, I believe this is at alpha, that it's disabled by default and doesn't affect performance when it's disabled. So, I mean, that does some protection.
Yeah, I think the question is, is our strategy right now good enough? Are we preventing new alpha features from destabilizing the rest of it well enough, or are we not doing that? I think that's what we need to.
Because some of these are big and they span multiple PRs. No one knows if the feature flags and things are correctly honored, right?
So one way to address this, and Brian and folks in the BTR, is to find someone who's willing to do a feature branch for their proposed feature. Right, so something on the roadmap of sufficient heft.
BTS, it's pretty good.
Well, it's already in that state because there's nothing other than what's going into Envoy, which we pick up, going into the code base at all for BTS.
Well, the control plane changes when they kick in.
Yes, when they kick in, yes, could be an example. But if we want feedback sooner, BTS might not be the best example.
I see what you're saying.
Because there's a decent chance it could slip again. So, but still a feature that requires more than one person to work on it, that could have a decent amount of lateral impact, so that we could evaluate, because the pain of doing feature branches, right? And we could still adhere to feature flags and all the other requirements of alpha, right? Because it doesn't matter if you decide to ship the feature, you still have to give users control. Whether that would work efficiently, right? Can the CI system handle it? GitHub processes, ...
Yeah. Yeah, feature activation is different from putting in code here. So I'm in agreement with you. Telemetry API work might be interesting that Doug is proposing for telemetry and telemetry working group, extensions working group. But it might be a net new thing, so I don't know if it destabilizes the core.
Right. Well, the first thing is if the BTR folks think that they can handle a feature branch from a process standpoint, because we're not even ready for that. Like, we can't ask for process change. So
currently, I don't think we have it set up to handle feature branches, the PROW and everything. I haven't looked into how difficult that would be to set up, though.
We're a bit over time. I had one concern that I'd like to maybe talk about next TOC, which is I see a lot of things labeled, they're going to alpha or a couple into beta, and nothing is GA. And I think we as a project need to maybe start focusing a little bit more on getting some stuff to actually GA. We have do we have any stable APIs yet? Do we have anything that's in V1 API, or is everything still beta? I think we need to actually maybe move towards saying, yes, this is a stable API and we will not change it. because I think part of the problem we're facing is because everything's like alpha beta, nobody knows what is reliable and what's not, and so they think everything is reliable, and then we have these problems where upgrades break people. Like, oh, you broke me. Well, you were using alpha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I think
So,
we
like,
need to process how long people can stay on alpha beta.
So Sven, like if I look at just this spreadsheet that networking working group has, for me, like row 4 is a good candidate to bump out in favor of what you just said.
Lynn said something that we kind of skipped over. I thought it was a good suggestion. Sorry, no. Should we? I mean, basically, Lynn, are you proposing that you can only be in alpha for X time units and that sort of thing? It's up or out.
Yeah, especially experimental alpha and even beta. I mean, I think we need a time box on the feature. Make sure you know.
Yeah.
I was gonna.
I like it.
Can I just add it to next? Let me just add it to next week's. I didn't want us to actually talk about it now, just because we're
okay.
Yeah.
We're over.
So a way to say this also will be if networking working group can come back with 2 features they think they can promote, and that's the standard we can set for 1.9. That might not be a bad idea for other working groups. Before you think about adding more things in alpha, make sure you have enough B and S there. 2 is not a large number to us.
Yeah. So one other thing that maybe because we're talking about roadmap at this point, and there's been a lot of discussion about stability, is whether the TOC should provide some top-level guidance for what the target for the 1.9 release should be.
Yes.
We're not going to get to it today, but that should probably be the #1 item on the agenda next week, because if we collectively as an organization make the decision that the most important thing that we could do is stabilize what we already have, right? Move slow and fix things, right? Obviously that would be very useful guidance for everybody working on the project, and we should then focus a bit less on features and items on these various roadmaps that are stability related. Right, that there are obviously things that working groups need to deliver that are kind of effectively blockers for certain things. I don't think we would gate that, but it would be guidance we might want to give.
All right, I threw both those onto next week's agenda.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I'd argue that whether it's a stability release or whether it's a release focused on features should really be decided before we present all the roadmaps, because
I like that.
It's a good point.
Yeah, no, I agree, Brian. I feel like
we missed the boat, I think. Yeah,
we missed the boat by 30 minutes.
Yeah. One thing that is coming up on chat, are we meeting next week because there's KubeCon?
I believe I wasn't planning on attending all of KubeCon.
Yeah, I can do it at least.
Same here.
I was planning on attending this, not KubeCon.
Okay, so
we have a quorum.
I guess we'll show up for our talk, Lynn, but that's about it.
Which is Tuesday. Yeah. The other thing really quickly, Zhonghu mentioned about rate limiting. We also have our user asking, it's like, okay, Mixer is being removed. What do we do on rate limiting? Because I think that's the most single feature of Mixer that people likes to use. So what's our recommendation? So I back to what you guys were discussing, stabilized feature, and also having story in place for features we are deprecating and removal. I think it's very, very important.
Yeah. Okay, let's.
Yep. I agree, Lynn.
Let's add all that for next week.
Yeah, that's good topic.
Thank you, guys.
All right, folks. Bye.
All right, everyone have a good weekend.
Bye.
Stopping the